Hey everybody, today I, as promised, wanted to bring you some of the better decks at the moment in the game. A little bit of a scuffed meta snapshot. The first one I did was received with, mostly positive feedback, and I figured I'll just do it again. We're on a new patch, there's quite a few new decks available, and I have a decent insight into what the meta's looking like at the moment, although can't say I'm the best player, of course, on this patch or whatever, so there are probably some spicy decks being played here and there, some other stuff, and of course, in a few days' time, the meta will evolve, and maybe some of this stuff won't be so good anymore, or alternatives will have been found. But I'm going to give you one or two decks for each of the factions which are very good, very powerful. Some will be tier 1, some will be high tier 2, or however you want to define the tiers. They won't all be amazing. I'm not going to give them a tier 1, a tier 2 and whatnot, because pretty much all of these should be fine to climb with if you're having to play only one faction to climb. And of course, if you're on pro ladder, then of course you're going to have to play multiple different kinds of decks. But this should give you an idea of what the kind of top level is mostly looking like. Of course, there are always going to be exceptions, and there in fact are a lot of exceptions these days to the meta decks that are being played. But what are the typical stuff? So let's start with monsters. Now, typically you've got big Woodland. I'm sure you guys know what this looks like by now. It's just the big guys. Some of them run ghouls. I've been even over this deck before in the past in the meta snapshot type thing. Some versions are different to others, maybe without crones, with crones, witches, ghouls, etc. This is like a pretty standard list, I think it's fair to say. Some don't even run all of the big units, and they rely more on Unicorn and Chironex and other tools. This one's got a mixture, no ghouls and only Osrel, but should be a pretty good Woodland deck. A lot of people are also trying Gurnakora with a similar style of deck to this, in fact very, very similar. The benefit of Gurnakora being that you get more along round 1 and round 2 value from her, but less finisher power. And of course your deck is a bit weaker overall, but Gurnakora is also a solid choice for leader with this deck. You could definitely play her, mix and match a couple of cards around there. But those are kind of the two most popular and most powerful monster decks at the moment. Big Woodland and Big Gurnakora, I suppose you could call it. With variations on whether they run the actual big units or not, or whether they're relying more on crone value and other things. So that's the first thing, and I wanted to also mention Green Knight's Shoop deck, which he used to actually, I believe, come second in the open qualifier that just recently happened. So this is a tournament deck, maybe not representative of what's actually strong, but I wanted to throw it out there because from looking at it, it looks quite powerful. And just, a good Shoop deck, making it work in monsters. He actually played Shoop decks for all of his lineup. All his decks had Shoop in them. But I figured this looked pretty cool. Just some pretty decent stuff, one-offs, of course, to enable Shoop. And I will probably try this deck out in a day or two. So well done, Green Knight, for coming up with this. And I guess the TLG crew behind him and helping him out as well. So that's another alternative. I haven't tried it myself. I don't know how strong exactly it is, but it did do pretty well in an open qualifier, which is, of course, the best players all playing in a tournament against each other, so that's worth keeping in mind. So, what next? We have Nilfgaard. Now, there's two kind of ways to run Nilfgaard at the moment. Most of the time, you're running Morvran. There are a few Ardell decks, but I would put these probably a little bit lower down on a tier list compared to Morvran. He's just not quite packing as many provisions. His ability can sometimes brick, and it does force you to play a few cards that you don't want to in the tactics. But there are ways to make him work, and people are playing him. I just think Morvran's a little bit stronger. So firstly, we have Mulligan Morvran, as I'm going to call it, but this is pretty much the standard way to play Morvran if you don't want to go the Shoop approach. You can just play good value cards. Some versions run Horn, potentially, and more row stacking, maybe a Germain, whatnot. Mulligan's version here is just pure value, a lot of really good bronzes, good golds. Most of the deck, in fact, is gold, and you're relying on the Orc, Seric, Unicorn, Chironex, Ifrit. Lots of removal, lots of control, and good value, powerful plays. So that's the first way you can play Morvran, and I'd say depending on who you ask, it's stronger or weaker. Mulligan actually won the qualifier with this deck, although I think it's fair to say he was targeting big Woodland Spirit in some way, even if, it wasn't in a big way. Things like Blue Dream and Leo and whatnot. Maybe no Peter. Oh wait, he of course has Peter. What am I talking about? So yeah, I would say this was countering Woodland a bit, but very strong way to play Morvran if you don't want to go the Shoop approach. And of course, There is also the Shoop approach if you want to do that. I've played this deck before. Iris should be different. It should probably be False Siri, and you should probably play Isbel as well in this kind of a deck, or some other thing. But Shoop Morvran is another way that you can make Nilfgaard work very well. As I said, Ardell is also possible, although probably weaker than these two types of decks. Obviously, this isn't the perfect Shoop list. Far from it. I'm sure there are people with much more refined versions, but that's my take on it anyway. And Morvran Shoop is another way to play Morvran if you want to. So, next up we have Skellig. Skelliger's pretty versatile, but most people are playing Crack. In fact, almost all people are playing Crack at the higher ranks, or if they are trying to win in the qualifier or whatever. Crack seems to be the strongest leader at the moment. That doesn't mean Arnulf or Harold or whoever else isn't playable, but they're going to be a lot weaker, I think. Crack is just kind of the go-to. He's good on provisions. He's good on everything else. This is probably the standard way that people are playing him with Commander's Horn, and yeah, no Wild Boar. Although some versions do run Wild Boar, some don't run Daran. There's a lot of ways you can play Crack as well. Pretty versatile leader. I'm personally not a huge fan of Daran and the Savage Bears because he got nerfed. 2 points is quite weak, and of course you're over-thinning a little bit. Not over-thinning, but you're running out of bricks that you need to get rid of potentially with your stuff like Burner and Skulls occasionally. But that being said, the prevailing attitude is this is probably the way to play Crack, the stronger way at least. It's pretty good against everything, has a good long round, good short round, etc. So this is kind of the standard Crack, and of course I was playing a bit of a Spear Wild Boar version. This probably isn't quite up to snuff with the other decks. Stuff like Geralt of Rivia is a bit clunky. That will probably need to be taken out. But this is kind of a more artifact and Wild Boar long round focused deck. Also quite powerful. I got to Pro Ladder with this one, so it's definitely not bad. It might not quite be to the level of the value Crack in terms of power, but it's very close, I think. Or at least versions similar to this are pretty close. So that's the other way to play Crack, from my experience, that works quite well, is go more heavy on the Wild Boar and Spear approach. Gives you a really, really powerful long round. Kind of obvious. So, up next for Skrtel and Northern Realms, they're probably the two weaker factions. I think it's pretty much, consensus among everyone that they're the weaker factions. Mulligan's trap deck here, again, kind of a little bit targeting. Sorry, it's bugging out a bit. Kind of targeting Woodland again a little bit, I guess, with this, with the Blue Dream and whatnot. But just a good all-around solid Skrtel deck. I'd have to ask Mulligan exactly, how strong this is, because I haven't really played any good Skrtel decks, save for Filavandrel, which can get an honourable mention, I suppose. I don't think Filavandrel is that bad. He seems to be okay, but not great. Maybe sitting at low tier 2 sort of level. Maybe high tier 2 at a push, but I don't know about that. Either way, this is kind of a trap deck, but got some good value cards as well in there. Apparently Crushing Trap is pretty good now. And of course, Eorveth's Gambit, Eorveth to synergize with all that stuff, Horn and Pitfall as well, are pretty strong cards. 8 points and potentially even more with Pitfall Trap, if you can make that work. And some bronzes that synergize with that. Not a bad deck, I'm sure. Haven't tried it myself, but I'm pretty sure I've seen playing on ladder and whatnot that a lot of opponents are running similar stuff to this if they're going with Skrtel. Seems to be the most popular archetype to be running. That being said, there is, of course, the Filavandrel buff deck, which is an alternative. I'm not sure how strong it is as an alternative. Doesn't seem to be the best deck ever. I would say maybe in the tier 2 somewhere. Probably lower down compared to other decks. But it's worth mentioning. It's an alternative if you don't want to play Traps and Broover. If you don't want to play Broover, well, Filavandrel is pretty much the only thing you can play. Otherwise, I guess you can go with Ithne. And there are a few Scorch Ithne decks running around. I just don't think they're particularly strong. Yeah, that would be my judgment on that. And then finally, we have Northern Realms. And probably, I think, Meave is really the only way to play Northern Realms at the moment. You have this engine overload stuff, predominantly pioneered by Shinmiri, I think, who came up with this sort of archetype. But idea is to swarm the opponent with engines, get Hubert value at the end. Do I even have Hubert in this deck? I do. He's just, for some reason, he's turned into Avalak. I don't know what's up with the bugs here, but yeah, you get big value with Hubert at the end of a round. 3 hopefully after damaging a lot of their units with your engines that have hopefully not been removed because you played so many throughout the game. Pretty powerful deck. That being said, Northern Realms is in quite a weak spot along with Skrtel. I wouldn't say I don't think they're tier 1 decks. I wouldn't put them up there. Probably tier 2, yeah, at the highest. And really, you could definitely play Shoop Meve as well. I've seen that being played. I've also seen Demavand, and I have been playing some Demavand Shoop myself. I just don't think it's very good. I wouldn't put it up there with the other strong decks for each faction. I would say Meve is probably the best pick. And judging from what decks people played on the Open Qualifier, I think they are in agreement that Meve is the pretty much only viable way to be playing Northern Realms right now. If you want a really solid, strong deck. That being said, there's always going to be a faction that's weaker, right? Northern Realms and Skrtel right now are filling those slots. That's why I only have really one deck for you for each of those factions. But that's pretty much all the playable stuff right now. Quite a lot of diversity. Each faction definitely has stuff that can be played and you can do well with. And yeah, I just wanted to bring you those decks, give you my opinion on what is strong at the moment. It is just an opinion, of course. People will agree and disagree, I'm sure. And there's decks I haven't talked about that I'm sure people are playing that are very good. I will, of course, have missed some things. The meta will, of course, develop. All those caveats, but yeah. Hopefully that gives you a good idea of what the stronger decks are for each faction. Hopefully you enjoy this kind of quick, scuffed meta snapshot, if you will. And I'll see you guys next time.